someone comes in and they say, I want a shag. Don't give me a mullet. But their hair is only this long. It's going to be awfully tough to follow my last tutorial if your hair is any shorter than this. Let's check it out. So how do we cut a shag on shorter hair? The last one we cut, we started with the shortest hairs and worked our way to the longest. In this case, we're going to start with our longest hairs. And we're going to start in the back. This is something a little non-traditional. So I'm still going to separate the head front and back. Make that comb about as level as you can, right where the head curves away from that comb. Now, when someone has particularly fine or thin hair, it can be difficult to have a nice full perimeter. Sometimes that's something people want. Sometimes it's something they don't want. If they don't want a full perimeter, when I say perimeter, I mean the bottom. If they don't want their perimeter to be super full, then you don't have to invite all that hair down there. You can include all of this in your layers. So I'm going to take a radial parting, and in the beginning, I'm going to grab all of this hair. And I want you to see what's going on here. And we'll say that this guest has expressed concerns that they don't want their perimeter to be too thin. So I'm just going to go to the widest part of the head, pull everything out 90 degrees until all those hairs fall out, and I'm going to cut what's left. So what that means is that all of this hair gets to stay in the perimeter, and then I cut right there what's left. Notice how I have this really large section, but this hasn't even caught up with it yet. Really what I'm cutting is this right here. Doesn't look like much. But watch, as we go, I went 90 degrees from the apex of the occipital. Now I'm going to go 90 degrees from the crown. That's going to be my guide. We can cut there. Now I'm going to go 90 degrees from the top of the head. All of this falls out. I get to cut that. And we're already looking really shaggy. Notice how by the time we got to the top, even though that hair doesn't look that short, I have this much layering in this haircut. That's a whole lot of layering. So I'm going to follow this around. This is a beauty school haircut. This is often referred to as the 90-degree cut. And what most of us have to do in order to get our cosmetology license. She's already rocking that short shag look. And let's say that's not shaggy enough. She wants even shorter layers. If I were to start over and cut these even shorter, that's going to take away from her perimeter down at the bottom. I don't want to do that. I also don't want this to look super duper heavy. I want these top, especially these top shortest layers, to be really light and blended. It would be the difference between this and this, where everything's blending. So at this point, I'm going to do my radial partings again. I'll start in the back center. We elevate, but I'm going to do something that often people will refer to as a concave layer. I'm going to make sure that my line points down to the center. Right where we separated that front to the back, I'm pointing up in the air, and I can add a ton more layering in without inviting too much scalp to the party. So that's going to give it a lot of good shag. At the end of the day, we're not cutting off that much hair, but it's going to make a dramatic difference at the end of the haircut. Now, as we transition to the front, remember our layers started at the widest part of the occipital bone, which means when I transition to the front, if I take that same parting, I'm going to cut a big hole right here. because that's exactly what my guide would tell me to do. That's not what I want to do. In the back, I went 1, 2, 3. My third one was concave or sloping down toward the head. When I move around to the side, as I said a second ago, this 1 would cut a hole down here. So instead of going 1, 2, 3, we're just going to go 2, 3. So I go straight to that second position. There's my guide. Notice the perimeter falls out. 2. Now I'm pointing basically up to the ceiling. 3. 2. 3. As we get around to this front part, we want to continue doing those radial partings. I want you to notice how there's really 3 hairlines on the head. You're dealing with 3 different densities. We have the back hairline where we're dealing with hair from the very top of the crown down to the nape. On the side, we have hair from the top of the head down to the ear. This is much less density we're dealing with on front versus back. Once we get in front of that ear, there's a third hairline that not a lot of people talk about, and that's this stuff right here in front of the recession. And now we have a hairline dealing with only this much. So as I continue my radial partings on this haircut, where before I went 1, 2, 3, on the side, and I skipped number 1, I just went 2, 3. On this front section, right where that head starts to bend forward, I stop there. I'm gonna pivot from there. I'm gonna skip 1, because that would be bad news. I'm gonna skip 2, because that would take too much out. And I'm gonna go straight to 3. And I really just wanna connect the dots. And you can see my previous guide and my perimeter. Ideally, I wanna connect them. So now on this side, we have that shag that is uniform throughout, but not a ton of framing in the front, which is good. That's what she wanted. I'm gonna get the other side. So when you're cutting your dominant hand side, you're gonna be standing in front of your guest and working your way toward yourself. Always working toward the face from the guide in the back. So here we have a really subtle modern shag. So she has a little bit of face framing. Let's say we want to really enhance that. One of the first things I'm going to look at when I'm enhancing face framing is most face framing. If I want to keep the shape of the haircut, this is sort of a shag bob sort of shape. I need to make sure that my face framing does not cross that line, this distinction between the front and the back. So if my face framing crosses that line, this is going to start to look more like a V shape. In this case, this person doesn't want that, so I'm going to show you how to avoid that. Once again, putting my comb right on top of the head, the very apex of the head, I'm just going to make a line straight down from there. And that's pretty much going to put me usually somewhere around the ear, maybe just behind it. It really does depend on the thickness of the hairline, where your guest's ears are. Everyone's a little bit different. But don't base your reference on the ears, base it on the very highest point of the head, straight down. So as a general rule, this is the hair that is allowed to be in the face framing. Now I get to choose the angle. If I only want the tiniest amount of face framing, I can start here, but I need to finish there in order for it to really be visible. So I can do this. If I want a ton of face framing, I need a steeper angle because I'm always going to connect the dots from my shortest face framing piece down to right here. I want to make sure I'm meeting up with my longest length of the perimeter before it transitions to the back. So in this case, she has a couple little stray hairs up here that are fairly short. That's going to set my angle of my face framing at something pretty steep. So on my dominant hand side, I'll step to the side. I'm going to start in the back. I've determined my angle and I'm going to point straight up, and I'm going to wait until that hair just starts to leave my fingers, and then I know I can cut everything above that. Now what I effectively did is just cut pretty much about a comb's width. So So I'm gonna walk around the head and forward a little, making sure that I'm not over directing that hair in any direction. Straight up and down. This part up here really gets people confused because they want to pull it all away and cut it there. Pull it right in front of the face, right where that hair is not leaning any particular way. So I'm going to continue walking, pointing upward. Then when I pull it away, I'm starting to see that face framing I want. In general, I like to do this a couple times. Never have I cut hair and on my first snip been like, that's perfect. You always want to go over it a couple times. So in this case, I'm gonna walk it back because I know that's actually my target. So I'm gonna adjust my angle a little bit. I wanna be even steeper. There's that rock star face framing we were looking for. On your non-dominant hand side, it's gonna be the same thing. Take that parting from the apex down. All of this stuff gets left alone. And instead of pointing upward, I'm pointing downward with my non-dominant hand as I hold that hair, making sure that there's no over direction. Then we're gonna work our way back down. So now she has no bangs, lots of shag, and in this particular case, a nice full perimeter. Is it a mullet? Erica thinks not. She says, don't diminish my style by calling yours a mullet. I don't want to start any beef with anyone. Fabulous versus fearless. Stevie Nicks versus Joe Exotic.